They called him Silent Jack, not because he was quiet by choice, but because a bullet to the throat had stolen his voice forever. For 3 years, he'd lived in a world without sound, until the day he heard a woman singing by the creek and realized he wasn't as broken as he thought. Colorado Territory, autumn of 1884. The mining town of Silver Ridge nestled between towering peaks that caught the morning light like ancient guardians watching over the valley below. It was a place where men came to find their fortunes and often lost their souls instead, where the sound of pickaxes against stone provided a constant rhythm from dawn to dusk. But Jack Morrison heard none of it. He sat on the porch of Murphy's boarding house, his tall frame settled into a worn wooden chair, watching the world move in perfect silence. 3 years ago, a bullet meant for his heart had found his throat instead, leaving him alive but stealing something perhaps more precious than life itself, his ability to hear the world around him and speak to it in return. The townspeople called him Silent Jack, though none of them knew his real name. He'd arrived in Silver Ridge 2 months ago with nothing but the clothes on his back, a well-maintained Colt .45, and a leather satchel containing enough gold dust to pay for room and board without questions. He worked odd jobs around town, loading wagons, fixing fences, anything that required strong hands and no conversation. Most folks gave him a wide berth, unsettled by his silence and the way his gray eyes seemed to watch everything with the careful attention of a man who'd learned to read the world through sight alone. Children pointed and whispered behind their mothers' skirts. The saloon girls tried to catch his attention with bright smiles and low-cut dresses, but Jack remained as unreachable as the mountain peaks surrounding the town. On this particular morning, Jack was cleaning his pistol, a ritual that had become meditation in his silent world, when movement by the creek caught his eye. A young woman knelt beside the water, scrubbing clothes against the smooth stones. Her auburn hair was tied back with a simple blue ribbon, and she wore a faded calico dress that had seen better days but was clean and carefully mended. Jack had noticed her before. Emma Hartley, the schoolteacher who'd arrived just a week after him. She lived in a small cabin behind the schoolhouse, kept to herself mostly, and treated him with the same polite nods she offered everyone else. Unlike the others, she didn't stare at him with curiosity or pity. She simply accepted his presence as naturally as she accepted the sunrise. As he watched, Emma paused in her washing and sat back on her heels, gazing at the mountain peaks where the aspen trees had turned gold with the changing season. Then she did something that changed Jack's world forever. She began to sing. Jack's hands stilled on his pistol. For 3 years he had lived in absolute silence, cut off from the music of human voices, the whisper of wind through trees, the babble of creek water over stones. He had accepted this as his fate, learned to navigate a world where communication came through gestures and written words on scraps of paper. But now, impossibly, miraculously, he could hear her voice. It was soft and sweet, carrying a melody he didn't recognize but felt in his bones. The song spoke of longing and hope, of finding beauty in simple things, of love that endured despite hardship. Emma's voice rose and fell like the creek water beside her, pure and clear and achingly beautiful. Jack stood so quickly that his chair nearly toppled backward. His heart hammered against his ribs as he strained to make sure he wasn't imagining it. But no, the sound was real as the tears that suddenly blurred his vision. Emma finished her song and returned to her washing, unaware that she had just performed a miracle. That evening, Jack found himself walking past the schoolhouse as Emma prepared her lessons for the next day. Through the open window, he could see her at her desk, grading papers by lamplight. He approached slowly, uncertain how to communicate what had happened, what she had done for him. Emma looked up as his shadow fell across her window. She smiled and came to the door, wiping her hands on her apron. "Good evening, mister." She paused, realizing she'd never learned his name. Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper and a pencil stub, tools he'd grown accustomed to carrying. He wrote quickly and handed her the paper. "Jack Morrison, I heard you singing today." Emma read the note, her brow furrowing slightly. "That's very kind, Mr. Morrison, but I thought you couldn't." She stopped, understanding dawning in her brown eyes. Jack nodded and wrote again. "I can't hear anything else. Just you." Emma stared at the paper, then at him, then back at the paper. That's impossible." Jack wrote, 3 years of silence. Then your voice. "Don't know why." Emma was quiet for a long moment, studying his face in the lamplight. She could see the sincerity in his gray eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly as he waited for her response. "Would you like to come in?" she asked finally. "I could make some coffee." Jack hesitated, then nodded. Emma's small cabin was simple but comfortable, with books lining makeshift shelves and children's drawings pinned to the walls. She moved around the kitchen with quiet efficiency, preparing coffee while Jack sat at her small table, hat in his hands. "What happened to you?" she asked gently as she set a cup before him. Jack wrote, "Gunfight in Kansas." "Man was quicker than I thought. Bullet caught my throat. Doc said I'd live but never hear her speak again. And you've been alone all this time." "Safer that way. Man who can't hear trouble coming is a liability." Emma sat across from him, cradling her own cup. "Is that why you came here? To be alone?" Jack considered this, then wrote, "Came here to disappear. Didn't expect to find reason to want to hear again." The words hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. "Would you like me to sing again?" Emma asked softly. Jack's pencil moved quickly. "More than anything." Emma smiled and began to hum, then gradually added words to a gentle ballad about a traveler finding his way home. Jack closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him like warm rain after a long drought. When she finished, he opened his eyes to find her watching him with wonder. "I still can't believe it," she murmured. Jack wrote, "Why do you sing?" "My mother taught me," Emma replied. "She said music was a way to touch souls, to bridge the spaces between people when words weren't enough." Jack stared at those words, "bridge the spaces between people," and felt something crack open in his chest. For 3 years he'd built walls around himself, convinced that his silence made him less than human, unworthy of connection. But Emma's voice had found him across that impossible divide. Over the following weeks, Jack found excuses to be near the schoolhouse, the creek, anywhere Emma might be. She began to understand his presence and would often sing while she worked, glancing over to see him standing nearby, his face peaceful in a way that made her heart ache for the loneliness he must have endured. They developed their own form of communication, his written words and her spoken responses, her songs and his rapt attention. Emma learned that Jack had been a deputy sheriff before the shooting, that he'd lost his parents young and had been essentially alone most of his life. Jack learned that Emma had come west after her father's death, seeking a fresh start and a chance to make a difference in children's lives. One evening, as autumn deepened into winter, Emma was singing by her fireplace when she noticed Jack writing furiously. When she finished, he handed her the paper. "I dream about your voice now. Even in sleep I can hear you." Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. Jack, ... He wrote again, "I know I can't offer much. Can't even tell you how I feel out loud. But these weeks with you, they've given me more than the 3 years before them." Emma reached across the small space between them and placed her hand over his. "You don't need words to tell me how you feel. I can see it in your eyes, in the way you listen to me sing like it's the most important thing in the world." Jack turned his hand palm up, intertwining their fingers. He wrote with his free hand, "Is it enough? A man who lives in silence?" "Oh, Jack," Emma whispered, tears glistening in her eyes, "don't you understand? You're not silent at all. Every look, every gesture, every time you appear just to hear me sing, it all speaks louder than words ever could." That night, as snow began to fall outside Emma's window, She sang softly while Jack sat beside her, their hands clasped together. And though he would never hear the wind or the creak of floorboards or the laughter of children, he had found something more precious than sound itself, a voice that spoke directly to his soul, and a love that needed no words to be understood. Winter passed into spring, and the people of Silver Ridge grew accustomed to seeing the silent man and the singing schoolteacher together. Emma would hum while she tended her garden, and Jack would appear as if summoned by magic. She would sing while she hung laundry, and there he would be, leaning against a fence post with something approaching a smile on his weathered face. The children began to understand that Mr. Jack couldn't hear them, but that he watched over them just the same. They learned to wave instead of calling his name, to tap his shoulder gently when they wanted his attention. And sometimes, when Miss Emma sang to them during their lessons, they would see Mr. Jack standing outside the schoolhouse window, and they knew that somehow, some way, he could hear their teacher's voice even when he couldn't hear theirs. Jack and Emma's story reminds us that true connection transcends the barriers we think separate us. Sometimes love finds a way to bridge even the deepest silences, proving that the heart hears what the ears cannot. If this tale of impossible love touched you, subscribe to the Frontline Voice for more stories from America's frontier. Hit that like button if you believe love finds a way. Tell us in the comments, what would you do if you could only hear one person's voice? Share this story with someone who needs to remember that love speaks in many languages. Thanks for joining us where silence meets song, and broken hearts learn to beat again. Until next time, keep listening for the voices that matter most.